Today, let's make a tiered doll skirt perfect for an 18-inch doll. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today is another Stitchmas video, and we are making a doll skirt perfect for an 18-inch doll. So to start this off, you are going to want a single layer of fabric, and we are going to be cutting out 3 strips. So the first is going to be 4.5 inches by 15 inches long. So this is going to be the top portion of our skirt. You could really use any type of fabric for this. I'm using actually a knit material, but I would highly recommend if you're a beginner to use something such as cotton or a woven material that does not have any stretch. I will be talking about different ways that you can sew this though as we go on. So once you get that first strip cut out, we are then going to move on to our second strip, which this one is going to be 3.5 inches by 22 inches. So as you can see, these strips, they are getting longer and the width is varying. As with the top strip, we needed to take into account a waistband, and then for our bottom strip, it's going to be a little wider because we take into account a hem. So the bottom is going to be 4 inches by 30 inches. So once you get all of those cut out, you can actually lay them on top of each other so that you can see you have this tiered effect. And what we will be doing is we're going to be gathering these so that we give it that nice gathered full effect. But first what we need to do is finish off our edges. So for this, I'm just using pinking shears. This is more of an optional step in a way since these are doll clothes and we will not be washing them, but it does give it a little bit more professional touch to finish off your edges. So once you've gone through and you've kind of trimmed all of them up using your pinking shears, it's now time to begin doing our gathering stitches. So to do a gathering stitch, you go to your sewing machine and you are going to make it in a straight stitch, but have it be as wide as possible so that stitch length be as long as you can. So on mine, that is a size 5, and we are going to be doing this for the middle tier as well as that lower tier, and then we will be repeating all of that again. So you're going to be doing 2 rows of those very long basting stitches. So as you can see now, I have that middle tier has those 2 rows of stitches, and then the bottom tier also has the 2 rows of stitches. So now we're going to be pulling gently one of the strings of our gathering stitches to get that tier to match the same size as the tier above it. So if I start with this middle tier, I'm gently going to be pulling and just gathering the fabric so that it is the same length as that tier above it, so that it is 15 inches long. And I am just going to repeat this. I'm going to try to have it gathered evenly throughout so there's not like a big gather in one spot and then everything is just flat, and this will give you a really nice gathering effect. So this is what mine looks like. It is nice and gathered evenly throughout. So now with right sides together, I am going to be pinning this up so that I can take a seam and attach these 2 tiers together. So a lot of this I am going to be using quilting clips for. I just found it easier, but if you do not have quilting clips on hand, you can definitely just use pins, and this will allow you to be able to then take that seam all the way across. Now when you go back to your sewing machine, be sure you change the stitch length back to the normal 2.5. Now I'm going to be sewing to the left of all the gathering stitches, and I'm just going to be taking a straight seam all the way through. So when you're doing this, try to make sure that the fabric is as smooth as possible. Since we do have those gathers in there, it can be a little difficult to do. So tip for me, when I'm sewing this, I do notice that sometimes I sew over some of the gathers. I don't think it's as big of a deal since this is a doll skirt, and as you'll see at the end, I'll show you what it looks like. I think it looks pretty cute and it works well for this case. So now I'm going to repeat all of those steps that I just did except for the bottom tier. So pulling that thread to make it so that it is the 22 inches, so it's the same length as our middle tier, and continuing on so that I'm pinning these together with right sides together, and then taking that seam so that I'm able to attach this so that we can have the full length of the skirt ready to go. So here is currently what the skirt looks like. As you can see, it has a really nice effect. So now it is time for us to begin the process of getting the waistband set up as well as working on the hem below. So for this, you're going to take that straight edge at the top of the skirt, and we are just going to be folding this down about 1/4 of an inch or so, and then I'm going to be using my quilting clips to hold this in place so that I'm able to take a seam. This is going to allow us to have a really nice and clean waistband so that we don't have any raw edges. So that's why I'm kind of doing this initial step of folding all the fabric down. Essentially, it's very similar to like a rolled hem effect, but we're just going to be using this for a waistband. Now I'm going to go to the bottom of my skirt for the hem where I am doing a rolled hem, and I am first going to again fold over the fabric into about 1/4 of an inch seam just all the way through, pinning this up, and then I'm going to take a seam for both the bottom as well as that top portion, which is going to be really small straight seams. Now if you were using something like a knit, be sure the whole time when I'm saying straight seam, you are using like a lightning stitch or a zigzag stitch so that it still has that stretch. Now as we go through, we now have the top portion and the bottom portion with those initial seams done. So it is time for us to sew up the side of our skirt. So I'm going to use my quilting clips again, press open any of these seams I need to, doing like a little finger press, and I'm just going to pin these up. I'm using my quilting clips and I'm just going to take a straight seam all the way down. This again, you could use a zigzag stitch or a lightning stitch if you're using knits, or just a straight stitch if you are using a cotton or woven material. So here's what our skirt looks like so far. It's a little big, and that's because we're going to be adding elastic. So I'm going to be grabbing my elastic. I'm using about 1/4 of an inch elastic for this, and I am going to be folding over my skirt into a 1/2 inch pocket for that elastic to go in, and I'm just going to do this all the way around the top of our skirt so that we have a casing for our elastic. So I'm just using my quilting clips as you can see here, and then I am going to be leaving about a 2-inch gap or so, and that's where I'm going to be inserting the elastic. So now I'm just going to go all the way around, sew this up so as close to that initial hem that I did, and then leaving that 2-inch gap. Now I'm going to repeat these exact same steps for the bottom, and this is going to be for our rolled hem. So I'm just going to be folding all of this fabric over. I'm going to do this about a 1/2 inch as well, and I'm just going to be pinning this so that I'm able to take that stitch all the way around. Since no elastic is going into this portion, I don't need to worry about leaving any part open. I can just take that straight seam all the way around my skirt to give it a really nice and clean hem effect. So after sewing the waistband, you can see that we have that all done, and then I do have the opening for where I'm going to be adding the elastic, and then I have gotten the hem all done at the bottom. I'm just going to trim off any extra threads that I have to clean this up, and now it is time for us to add the elastic. So for the elastic, I'm going to grab my doll, and I'm just going to see how much elastic I need to go all the way around, and maybe make it a little bit tighter so that it is sort of stretching very, very slightly. And then I'm going to be cutting that amount off, and this is the amount I'm going to be adding into my skirt. So it ended up being around 10 inches or so for me, and so I'm just going to cut this. I'm going to take a safety pin this into my elastic, and then I am going to start gradually feeding it into that waistband that we created on the skirt. So where that opening is, I'm just going to push the elastic through, being cautious the whole time that I am aware of the tail of the elastic. So since it is through that hole still, I don't want it to go all the way through the waistband without me holding on to it. You could also use a pin if it is harder for you to keep track of the other end as well. And then I'm going to pin these two pieces together so that I can take a seam directly across. Now for the seam, as you can see, I have it all lined up on my sewing machine, and I am just going to be taking multiple straight stitches going up and down. If you have any difficulty sewing your elastic, there's different things you can try. You could try using tissue paper on top. You could also try to have quite a large tail on the right end so that you're able to pull together. But I took about 6 or 7 seams, and then I am just going to be cutting off this tail with that extra string and putting it back into my skirt. And then I'm just going to be sewing that little opening closed, so finishing off the elastic waistband all the way around so that there's no openings, no way for the elastic to come out or be seen. So with that final seam, the skirt is now complete, so this is what it looks like. You have that really fun gathering effect all around. We have a really nice and neat rolled hem. Our edges have been finished off by using pinking shears, and this is what it looks like on the doll. You could make this skirt in so many different fun fabrics. You could definitely use lighter fabric, you could use heavier fabric, really whatever you wanted to, and this can just be a great staple piece and a great way to learn to sew. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more Stitchmas.